to Destination Change, a podcast where we talk recovery, treatment, and more. I'm your host, Angie Fiedler-Sutton, with the National Behavioral Health Association Providers, and I use she, her pronouns. My guest today is Barbara Aday-Garcia. Barbara is an accomplished CEO with over 39 years of extensive experience in the field of alcohol and drug use recovery services. Her career is distinguished by her leadership in program development, implementation, and management, particularly within the alcohol and drug treatment sectors. Barbara's deep understanding of California's DUI system and addiction treatment regulations has positioned her as a pivotal figure in shaping recovery services and policies. Currently serving as the CEO of AG Management Consulting, Barbara oversees a wide range of services aimed at enhancing organizational efficiency, standardization, and fiscal stability. Her work includes managing the California Association of DUI Treatment Programs, where she has been instrumental in the executive and administrative management of the association's operations, including counselor certification and continuing education. Thank you for joining us today, Barbara.
Thank you for having me.
Now, longtime listeners know exactly what I'm going to ask you first. It's always the first question. I like hearing origin stories. What made you decide to get into the addiction treatment field rather than all the other job opportunities that are out there for you?
Well, fresh out of high school, I started working in assembly, and I was on the night crew. And the night crew was a wild bunch. And so that kind of springboarded into, what do I really want to do with my life? And I happened to stumble upon Serenity House and Fellowship Center in Escondido through different family members. Quite impressive. Both of those recovery homes have changed so many lives. And one of the Fellowship Center was putting together a adolescent program. Now, I was 23 at this point and looking for something to do. When they started this adolescent program, I was all on board because I knew for young people, there wasn't a lot of education out there. I grew up in the time where drug and alcohol use and problems with that was not really addressed in the way that we address them today. We saw the, scare videos of marijuana and people going crazy, and we knew that that wasn't the case. Drugs and alcohol were prevalent in, middle school, elementary school, all of those, high school, certainly. But it wasn't something that was addressed outright. And so I thought that that would be something that I could get on board with and really make a difference, especially because I was still kind of young, so I could relate to what people were going through. So that is basically my journey to career that is, as you mentioned, over 39 years of service. And it started with the adolescents. And it was such a fun job. Number one, being on the ground floor of building something was exciting. But we went into the schools, we met with parents, we met with school officials and tried to get information into the schools in a way that would have a impact on the students. And at that time, there were a lot of different programs that were being built to address the problem that hadn't been talked about. And, we focused a lot on those types of programs, helping them to develop those programmatic things, especially in continuation schools, and getting the students that really weren't being heard. One of the things that I know your listeners who work with adolescents, it's a tough time in life, as we all know. You add alcohol and drugs to it, and that population is kind of trapped on where they're at. They have living situations that they are stuck in, and their emotions are all over the place. So it's a challenging population, but also very rewarding.
That's very good work. One of the reasons we call this podcast Destination Change is because we viewed recovery as a journey. It's not a one-way, straight line. You can go all over the place. You can pull back and all that. Talk about some of how you kind of see that in your day-to-day and what kind of barriers you see on a regular basis that keeps people from furthering their recovery journey.
Well, that's a really good, thoughtful question. And recovery to me is moving forward. So how do you do that? Everybody has a different path to drive. And some people have a harder path than others. We would look at some of the trauma that people can experience in early childhood through those teenage years into adulthood. And a lot of times those traumas will hold us back from our recovery journey. So it's really looking forward and saying, why am I getting in recovery? And being honest, which is hard for addicts to do, that honesty, that self-reflection, especially if you're still using, is very, very difficult. That's where the counselor comes into play. When we stumble across someone, whether they're mandated to treatment or they've chosen treatment because their family is at the end of the rope, most people probably don't go, skipping into the treatment center. Hi, I'm here. I'm ready to get sober for the rest of my life. That's generally not the way it goes. It's some kind of crisis that participates, that stepping through the door for the first time. We have said through the years that certainly relapse is a part of recovery. And, to a certain extent, that's true. As counselors, I think it's important to understand too that the message is that yes, relapse can be a part of recovery, but relapse could also mean the end of everything. So what can we do to help people with that relapse prevention? So knowing that people come into treatment for usually a crisis intervention, whether it be legal or family or financial, maybe it's the job says, you go into treatment or we're done with you. So the different ways that people get in, it's really then what happens in that experience, how that person is treated, how that person is able to self-evaluate. And that's the hardest thing, as we all know, for us to do, whether we're sober or not. Self-evaluation is very tricky. It's very difficult, and it can be very humbling. So when you look at the trauma that people may have experienced, and some of that trauma is self-inflicted also because of the use of alcohol and drugs, that there's a lot of shame that goes along with that. So if I address and self-evaluate, that shame may be so heavy that I'm not able to get through it. So it's really that individual. And I think when you look at our treatment system, it's so vast that we want to make sure that we can still see each person as an individual and look at what would their journey and help them see that they can get through to the other side. And that's difficult sometimes.
Mm. Your primary job is developing programs and management consultant. The job description is kind of in the title, but kind of give me sort of the elevator pitch of what that means to you. What do you do?
Well, the business that I have is executive and administrative management consulting. And it encompasses that's kind of a large, vast number of items that we could get into as a company. And that's really the way I wanted it. I wanted to be of service. I've been in the field so long in so many different positions. I've been a clerical, accounts receivable, a counselor, a supervisor, a manager. And so I've dealt with a lot of different clients in many different situations. Like I said, a lot of from the crisis to the recovery and sometimes the relapse, as well as the staff. And I love it. I love managing things. I like bringing order to chaos. I think that within treatment programs, sometimes it's a challenge to think of it as a business. And within that business mindset, what you can find is structure and calm, proper procedures. So everyone within that facility can feel professional, proud of what they do, transparent in everything that we do. And then that reflects on the client. So ultimately it comes down to how can you manage a business so it positively affects your client. And when I'm talking about the client, I mean from the first phone call to the first walking in through your door, What do they experience? It's interesting because one of the processes that we went through is the NIATEX improvement system. And it's a national system out there that really addresses treatment programs. And the very first thing that they have you do is call your treatment program. So you're in their training and they say, make that phone call. How does your staff pick up? How do you feel as a client? And then you take that down the road and you look at how do they feel when they walk in the door? What's the message? Is it a chaotic place? Is there old things posted on the walls? Is there peeling paint? Is there dirty mirrors? Things like that. So that feeling also, it affects that. So then you get down to your staff. How do you support your staff? And part of that is 1, clinical supervision, and 2, continuing education. So those are kinds of the things that we focus on in my business, is creating that environment for structure, calmness, and transparency for everyone, clients as well as staff. And so we offer a couple of different things, but one I'm really proud of is our continuing education platform. It's built by us who, I've been taking continuing education for years. And I, of course, get that continuing education through conferences, some in-person training, some online courses. And from being a management person who trains my staff, I wanted to bring a platform that was interactive, not just a PDF that you download and read. I wanted something that actually walks you through and provides some meaningful content for self-reflection. So we ask our clients to do a lot of self-evaluation and reflection. Do we do that ourselves? And really, it's reflecting on, how am I as a counselor? Do I have the skills? Do I have, diversity in my life? Am I striving to be better at what I do and not stuck? And so that's kind of the continuing education platform that we incorporated, was that self-reflection. So throughout a lot of our courses, we ask the learner to self-reflect or to evaluate themselves through that, just by answering some questions, that kind of thing. So it's a good platform, and it kind of goes into my 2 philosophies, clinical supervision and continuing education for counselors, and how do they interact. So we're in the process of building out our clinical supervision offering courses, and I think that will be very popular. It's an important part of the field that I think we could focus on as leaders in the field a lot more.
A quick ad to say that NBHAP also provides CE-based webinars, and we also have an industry calendar that is fairly comprehensive, that we try and list every conference or webinar that I find that is related to addiction treatment or behavioral health. Now, without giving away your secrets, what would you say is like some of the things that you hear the most in terms of problems?
Well, serving as the KDAP executive director, I'm responsible for the oversight of the counselor certification program that KDAP offers. And certainly we have to address ethical violations, right? Now, of course, you're going to have, as in any industry, you're going to have some bad actors. But generally speaking, the ethical violations that come in really have to do with the counselor kind of drifting on their own. And what I mean by that is there's not a set clinical supervision structure or good communication within the agency where policies and procedures are trained on and talked about and signed and revisited. And I'm not blaming treatment centers, for heaven's sakes, no, because they're doing the best that they can do a lot of times on a very small budget. So how do you, and it's not reimbursable. Clinical supervision isn't necessarily reimbursable. So how do you fit that into the finances of the company? So when you look at counselors out there and the violation of ethics, and I saw this as a manager myself, so I felt I created a pretty darn good environment with structure, policies and procedures, staff training on a regular basis. They met with their supervisors on a regular basis, but we still had ethical violations over the years. You're just going to have that with counselors or in any profession. You work in the banking system and eventually somebody's going to try and steal some money. You have all these safeguards in place, but somebody's still going to try and steal some money. In counseling, there's not just that money aspect, right? Like a banker, but we're actually dealing with people's emotions. We get to know them on a personal level while we're in those counseling sessions with us. And so that can cross boundaries very easily for a counselor. And that's the part where it's so important for that self-evaluation. And sometimes that means that somebody on the outside, like a clinical supervisor, is pushing you to do that, as opposed to you floating there by yourself. So I think that certainly treatment programs can help by having structure, by doing ongoing training, by having a clinical supervisor. Counselors, I think we can help counselors by being very clear in the beginning of their career. What does this mean? And the three certifying agencies, CADAP, CCAP, and CADI, have all worked throughout the years to implement some things that would help our registrants understand the field that they're getting in better. And one of those is the new counselor orientation, the 9 hours, as well as the continuing education every year of ethics and confidentiality. Because we saw that registrants were violating more than our certified group because they didn't have that foundational base knowledge right when they started within the field.
Excuse me. Now, you mentioned that, you've been in the industry for a while, since, the days of almost the Reefer Madness-y films. I'm a theater background and I love the Reefer Madness music. I'm musical. I will hands down say that. What would you say is the biggest change you've seen in the industry? Some things that is it better? Is it worse? Is it just different?
Well, certainly a lot of change. Number one, I think that one of the good things is the counselor professionalism. The profession of being a substance use disorder counselor, I think, has changed quite a bit. When you think about 20 years ago, let's say, when counselor registration or counselor regulations came out in California, there was no system to certify folks in California as a regular basis. Unfortunately, those regulations haven't changed in 20 years since they came out. The certifying agencies have had to evolve because they are nationally accredited. So the evolution of the professionalism of counselor certification in California can be directly tracked back to, first off, that base regulation being inputted, and then second, the certifying agencies continually increasing the professionalism of the field due to them having to be accredited for their certification programs. You have to incorporate best practices. So actually, California is now on par with the rest of the states. We're above some, below, a little bit below some, and right on par with others. Each state is a little bit different. So that's the big thing that I see, is there is more professionalism in the profession. Social model was something that was bandied about quite a bit. And you looked at recovery homes and residential treatment and that kind of thing. And it was really based upon that peer-to-peer sharing, which is good. But the profession of counselors goes beyond that peer-to-peer sharing. And that skill base is really what I see that has expanded that counselor beyond that I'm a peer and I've been through it. And it has actually brought more people into the field And we have best practices and, different models of how to facilitate. So I think there's so much out there now. And of course, now that we have kind of settled in and evolved, and then along comes COVID and gives us virtual treatment, right? So now we're in a whole new level of how do we deal with that virtual treatment? How do we evolve to incorporate that? Because you don't necessarily, it's very different. Obviously, you and I are meeting, we can see each other. It's very nice because we did talk on the phone or through email, but seeing each other and being able to connect on that level is much different than if it was just a phone call or just an email. It's not quite in person because I'm not seeing some of the subtle cues that I would if I was in person with you. You may be clenching your hands, and if they're below the screen, I'm not going to see that. So there's certain clues for counselors that we're not going to see, where we would see those in person. So it's an evolution of counselor skills to be able to deal with those virtual treatment sessions. How do you deal with a group virtually? That's a whole new set of skills that our counselors need to adopt in certain treatment types, right? So I think that professionalism is an evolution. I see it going in a very positive way. I'm really proud of the counselors out there. They're so dedicated and committed to their clients, to their treatment programs. There's a lot of pride out there. And we see it to their certifying agencies also. The certifying agencies have different people from different treatment programs that are certified with them. And their responsibility is to be able to represent everyone through their certification program. And I think we have three really good agencies out there that care about their counselors.
Now, kind of similar along the same lines, where do you kind of see the industry going in the next few years? We're still kind of in a massive change in the industry, especially now with what's going on in the world. Where do you kind of see what's going to happen in the next 5-10 years?
Well, I think definitely virtual is going to become even bigger. And I think AI is going to start becoming a player within that field. And what I think, and I'm hoping that we see soon and first, is that AI can help with some of the minutia that we get into with data collection and notes and, those kinds of things. There's so many different technology platforms out there that could help counselors be able to get through those things quicker and more efficient. So we can not only save money, but we can be more present for the client. And so I'm hoping that AI can play a big part in that, and I think it will.
Mm-hmm.
I think that in the next 10 years, I think you will see the evolution of the counselor certification profession. And the reason why I say that is because now we have peer mentors, right? Peer support people. And that's a new position, basically. And how does that interplay with the counselor? And I think that when you think about that social model program that we talked about within treatment, where it's peer-to-peer sharing, that's our peer support specialists. They are that peer-to-peer social model type of setting. So the professional counselor, the counselor who's registered, moving towards certification, and the certified counselor are on a different level. And I think that that's the piece that needs to evolve even further, is the counselor coming into the profession understands that it is a profession. It's a professional position, and they have more responsibilities. And that's not necessarily that social model peer-to-peer sharing. That the counselor needs to have skills, and those skills range from knowing all of your ethical boundaries and confidentiality requirements, but also those counseling skills that you need to help that client delve deeper. Because to get people, let's circle back to relapse and recovery, to allow people to the opportunity to self-evaluate honestly takes skills. It doesn't require necessarily a peer-to-peer sharing when you're in the counseling session. Now, the peer-to-peer sharing is an important aspect of treatment and recovery because we talked about that shame piece, and we've all been in some kind of situation that we're recovering from, whether it's direct use of alcohol or drugs. Maybe it's somebody in our life who was an addict and we're recovering from the trauma of them, or other traumas that are in our life and we're trying to recover. So that peer-to-peer sharing is an important aspect, but the counselor is a whole different type of position than that. So how do we evolve as a profession to that professionalism? So people who have a license, they're a marriage family therapist. They've licensed, they've been to school, they've passed an exam, they've gotten the experience in the workplace through internship, etc., and they gain a license. Well, our certified counselors are that too. Now, their schooling wasn't as long, but they've been through school, they've passed an exam, they've taken an internship, and they got the work experience. So that certified counselor profession is very important. So I see the evolution of that. AI, I think, is going to play a big. Virtual, I think, will be more. When you look in California at virtual services, if you live in the Bay Area, or you live in Sacramento, or you live in LA, or these big cities are very compacted with traffic.
Mm-hmm.
So you drive across town and it takes you a half an hour, where it's really like 5 miles. But you have a lot of traffic and stop and go, etc. So getting to the session sometimes gets you there more stressed out than you were when you started getting to that session. So maybe virtual can help with that. Also, when you look at rural areas, we don't have a large counselor base out in rural areas or a lot of treatment programs. So virtual can help with access. So I think it's a hard switch for counselors. It's a new skill, but I think it's an important skill, and it's an evolution in providing treatment out there. And it's an important skill. So I would suggest to counselors, start exploring that. Take trainings that talk about virtual services, that talk about telehealth. Learn how to run a group via telehealth. It's a new skill that I think will become more and more prevalent, especially as we become more populated.
Yeah, I was going to say I grew up in a fairly rural area myself. So while the internet and telehealth definitely have their problems, I would have been grateful to have something like that when I was growing up.
Right. Yeah.
Now, I know you probably don't have an average day, but I'm sure it's also a lot of meetings and a lot of trainings. What would you say is your favorite part of your day-to-day job?
Well, the diverse number of people I get to talk to. And, Angie, you being one of them, I would not have met you if I hadn't been in this position, right? So I meet so many people at so many different positions that it's exciting for me, because I get to kind of experience everything. Where if I was just in my office at my desk, going to meetings, doing emails, that gets redundant and kind of boring. What makes it exciting is the people. And once I get excited about something, then I, take it down the road. And so there's 2 different aspects of what I do, my consulting company and my contract with CADAP. And CADAP's my biggest contract. So certainly I take care of them, right? But I have a lot of contracts that are helping the treatment programs with certain aspects of what they do. And my primary focus is DUI. That's the majority of my experience. Although in my early career, I worked in the adolescent program that was county funded, and eventually that contract ended. I worked in an inpatient treatment program. I worked at a residential treatment program. So I have a little bit of diversity within there. But once I found DUI, that was my biggest passion. It was where I fit very well. So I've been in the DUI field in different capacities for so long. I have a really intimate knowledge of that I can provide to DUI providers. And I enjoy that. I enjoy writing policies and procedures for them and providing training and seeing what staff are out there. So diversity, I think, is what I love with my job, is because I will work on 4 different contracts throughout the day. And so it provides me with the excitement to keep going.
Well, actually, speaking of your DUI service, that was actually where I was going to head next. I was a member of SAD in high school, very much aware of the things. I have family members who are recovering alcoholics. Talk a little bit more about your work there, or how is it different from what your other work is, that kind of stuff.
Well, I'm very lucky. I have a large extended family, and we've been in California for a couple of different generations. So when I was born in Oakland Hospital and lived up in the Bay Area for half of my life, until I was like 16 or so, and then moved to San Diego, and I've been here ever since. So I'm based out of San Diego still. And some of the family stayed up north. Some of them came down here, but I have 3 siblings, and we're all very close, and we've all had kids now, and we're all, getting into our later years, not quite middle age, maybe a past middle age a little bit. So family to me is really important. And I think for recovery, it's finding those types of things that enhance your life and are more important to you than yourself a lot of times. Because what we know with people in recovery is, again, that shame factor, that trauma factor. Sometimes we have to be able to find something that means more than we do. And so a lot of times family can provide that. Sometimes it can't. So I feel incredibly blessed, and I have 2 daughters, and I have 1 grandchild and 1 on the way. I've been married for a long time. He always keeps track, but it's over 35 years. Yes. And, you're married 35 years. So sometimes you like each other and sometimes you don't.
Yeah.
We ended up building a fantastic life that we can look back on and kind of congratulate and pat each other on the back for sticking to it, even through the tough times. Working in the alcohol and drug treatment field, you're not going to get rich. That's for darn sure. And, pennies were always being pinched, but we made it through, and at this point now we're eyeing retirement. And I really, truly believe that my work in this field helped me see things differently, that allowed me to stay semi-centered, not all the time. I mean, I still go crazy at certain points. I mean, we're all human, but it allowed me to view my life and where I wanted it to go through the eyes of recovery. And I think that that's an important aspect, is where can I be if I get through those tough times? What's the reward on the other side? Now, if you have a drink or you have a drug, what's the reward on the other side? So I think it's a long-term view. Also, I think it's important to, AA always says stinking thinking. And, one of the things I have written in my office that I can look at is thoughts or things. Choose the good ones. And that's not always easy, because those negatives can come in and, we look at our current environment, our current political environment. There's a lot of stinking thinking. And some people get so wrapped up into that it invades everything. So occasionally you're going to have to say to yourself, you know what? I'm watching too much news. It's invading my psyche. Or this TV show I'm watching is too negative. It's invading my psyche. I need to switch to something different. And I think this field can help you focus on changing yourself, whether you're in recovery from alcohol and drugs or not. Again, we're all in recovery from something.
Mm-hmm.
So thoughts or things, choose the good ones and try and push out the bad and make those tiny adjustments that can have big payoffs to happiness.
Now, you've already kind of touched on this just now, in fact, but our audience is a wide range. We have people who are just starting out to people who've been in the industry, a long time. So I always ask for the people who are starting out, what kind of advice would you give to somebody just starting out, or what's your biggest lessons learned?
My advice is work hard, show up, look good. And by that, I mean, brush your hair, put on a suit jacket, a tie, a nice outfit. When you go to work, be at work and show that you are a professional. And then when you leave work, be a professional of your life, which is show up, work hard, and look good. And by looking good, I don't mean that means makeup or hair or, a dress and nylons. It's really dependent upon the facility, but a pressed shirt, goes a long way. And get noticed. If you want to move ahead and make more money, get noticed. And a lot of times that noticed is by going above and beyond. And if you go above and beyond, don't do it because you expect something in return. Do it because it makes you feel good in whatever, capacity that you can. So you go the little extra mile, you feel good. You can pat yourself on the back. Eventually you will be noticed and you can move forward in your career, whatever that means. And I think that, it's funny because I told you in the beginning that I started out in an assembly factory. And I loved it. I was very good at it. I learned everything on the assembly line, and there was places to go in that company. And then I stumbled across drug and alcohol recovery and went in a whole different direction. I didn't start out at college thinking this would be my career. I ended up there, and then I grabbed on. So it's grabbing on to something and making it a passion. And I think that is an important aspect of what we do. And every experience that you have brings something, like my assembly work. I use that for policies and procedures. What's the most efficient way to assemble this file? From very simple things like that, which can bring you a lot of joy to have a file that is nicely put together, right, in the most efficient manner. So it's finding those little things, your passion, what you're passionate about, and show up in your best light in every way that you can.
Great. Now we're getting close to the end, unfortunately. I always like to ask so people can take away something from the podcast. What kind of resources would you recommend that you use on a regular basis that people can look up if they want to learn more?
Well, I mentioned online continuing education, and I think that is such a good way to get your continuing education. So I would recommend that counselors look for courses that mean something to them, that provide a little bit more to their skill level, and try to not make it a burden, right? To think of it as an opportunity. So you mentioned that you guys have a great continuing education platform. You have an event calendar of things that are happening. So people should find somewhere to get that ongoing information to help further themselves, and think of it as an opportunity as opposed to a burden. And I know that that's hard to do sometimes when you're judging, you're drudging through sexual harassment training for the umpteenth time of your career, but apply that sexual harassment training to you, and that critical. So I think continuing education platforms, variety of continuing education platforms. When I get my continuing education, I go to many different providers to find different takes on things, different courses. And of course, they cost different amounts of money. There's some expensive, some not so expensive, some cheap. You just have to look around. So don't get stuck in a corner. And then I think if you can, as a person, get out to community meetings within the field and learn a little bit more. Take yourself out of the treatment center. If you come across a conference or something that's outside of the office, ask your facility if you can attend and say, this is, I can get continuing education hours. I can also learn more. So advocate for your ability to get out there in the community. It is one of the competencies that is in TAP 21, is playing a role in the community. So it can help, again, kind of diversify your thoughts. You learn new things, and you're gaining your skills, and maybe you're getting noticed by your company that, you're putting in a little bit of effort to source these things. Don't wait for your employer to do it for you. Do it yourself. Look around, enjoy your job, and make it a passion. And that means everything from your certification to your education, to your clients, to your facility, your treatment facility. And that can make a difference.
You mentioned the price of CE courses. I would be remiss if it not plug the fact that BHAP and BHAP members do get our CE webinars either for free or for sharply discounts, like up to 50%. So if you're not a member, you become a member. Now, to bring this all that back to the beginning, when all is said and done, why do it? Why do you do what you do?
Well, I enjoy it. And I think that's number one. I'm passionate about it. I enjoy it. I like challenges, even in my house. And my husband keeps going, why are you doing that? That doesn't need to be done. Well, I noticed it, and now it's a challenge. I have to finish it. I have to make it better. But I also think that we, as a profession, and I'm including myself, I don't see clients anymore. I don't manage a treatment program. But I am involved in the field, and I feel a part of it. I am still a certified counselor with both CADAP and CCAP. And I believe that we have such an impact on our communities that it makes me feel good about what I do and who I represent. That we are making our communities healthier. We're by one client at a time. And it's a real joy to be able to be a little part of that. Just think if we weren't around, yeah.
That is the perfect button to end this on. So for people who want to learn more about you or learn more about your business, where would they go? How do they find you?
You can find us at agmanagementconsulting.com. And it's agmc-services.com. And our website is there, and it has all the offerings that we have, which is quite diverse. Like I said, all the way from building websites to online CEU platforms to on-call counselor service. So we do quite a bit of diverse things through our company. And certainly you can find me at info@cadap.org. If you have questions about certification or a professional journey to certification. And I look forward to seeing, and I really appreciate you having me on today.
Yeah. Before I end it, is there anything that you wanted to talk about that we haven't, or that you thought I was going to ask, but I didn't?
No, it's been a great conversation.
Awesome.
You're a good leader. You're a good leader virtually even.
Thank you. You've been listening to Destination Change. Our guest today was Barbara Aday-Garcia. Thank you for being here. Our theme song was Sun Nation by Kitsa and used via Creative Commons license by the Free Music Archive. Please consider rating and reviewing the podcast on Apple Podcasts so we can get more listeners. In the meantime, you can always see more about the podcast, including show notes and where else to listen, on our website, www.nbhap.org. If you have questions for the podcast, please email us at info@nbhp.org. Thanks for listening.